Oh, what's good, YouTube, man? It's Gary with Another Fan TV back at you another video. Like the content in the video, go smash that like button, like the content in this channel. Always subscribe, man. Look, so we're in that middle of the second phase of free agency, right? So I want to talk about, what the Ravens have done so far. I'll kind of give a review of what they do need and where they go from here, right? So let's talk about it, right? So for the Ravens in the free agency so far, what they've done, players that they've signed. DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Rush, special teamer, linebacker, Jake Hummel, re-signed Ronnie Stanley, Pat Ricard, Tylan Wallace, Ben Cleveland, right? Now, obviously, they lost a host of other players to different deals across the NFL. You Pat McCarry, Brandon Stevens, the list goes on. Chris Boards, Malik Harris, guys like that, right? So when I look at what the Ravens have done so far, they've attacked a couple of areas that they need to attack. Wide receiver 3, they filled that void nicely with DeAndre Hopkins. They bring back Ronnie Stanley. They bring back Patrick Ricard and Tylan Wallace, which are 3 players that I wanted the Ravens to bring back that I thought filled important needs on the team, right? Tylan Wallace can be a punt returner. We know what Pat Ricard provides in the run game. And, Ronnie Stanley's a very, very valuable left tackle, right? So all of those moves made sense. They were good moves to make, right? I guess the only ones I really haven't talked about so far is Cooper Rush, Ben Cleveland, and Jake Hummel, right? So Jake Hummel, special teamer. To me, this is a direct Chris Board replacement. They lost Chris Board in free agency, who was a ace special teamer. Jake Hummel, it was a ace special teamer for the Rams. So like for like swap. Now the difference is I haven't seen him play true traditional linebacker in the NFL. So he may not be as good as Chris Boyd was last year playing true traditional linebacker. So it might just be a special teams player with special team player kind of swap right there. All right. Ben Cleveland to me is the most surprising one. After his, offseason, the DUI, things like that. Even with the fact that, it seems like him and Harbaugh don't really have the greatest relationship. It seems like Harbaugh just doesn't trust him to be on the field, point blank, period. I'm shocked he came back. Maybe his market wasn't that great. I believe it is only a 1-year deal. But he has an opportunity once again to compete for the starting job, and we'll see where that lands him. Right now, the one over the weekend that caused a lot of freakers, a lot of noise, was the Ravens signed Cooper Rush to a backup quarterback contract, 2 years, $6 million, with the potential to go up to 12. When those were first reported, it was for 2 years, $12 million. They didn't do the up to and stuff like that, which made a lot of people lose their mind. Right? Oh my goodness, $6 million for a backup quarterback. Ravens, this money could be going somewhere else. Listen, Cooper Rush is a experienced backup quarterback. I believe he's been in the NFL 9 years. A lot of that time in Dallas. Last year for the Cowboys, he went 4-4. Excuse me. So he can win you a couple games. So keep you in a couple games. He's nothing spectacular. He's a backup QB, right? Once they got rid of Josh Johnson, right, they let him walk. It was kind of obvious the Ravens were going in a different direction with backup quarterback, and they wanted somebody in who could functionally run the offense, right? I think that the Ravens, since not retaining Tyler Huntley, had kind of gotten away from the idea of we want somebody that's similar to Lamar Jackson. We want somebody that's can run the offense with Lamar Jackson's out. There is no other player that can duplicate Lamar Jackson in the NFL, right? So, and the Ravens don't run an offense anymore that's based around his legs in terms of running the football. So the Ravens can go after more traditional backup quarterbacks now. And Cooper Rush was one of the better traditional backup quarterbacks that was out there in free agency. I know Joe Flacco was mentioned. No, Joe Flacco still wants to be a starter. He still believes he's a starter in the NFL. So he wasn't going to come here and settle just for being a backup, even if the reunion story sounded nice, right? Cooper Rush, one of the better backups on the market. I didn't really get why people freaked out about it. I guess the $12 million that was initially reported had a lot to do with it. But really, if it really is truly only 2 years, $6 million. He only gets up to 12 if, God forbid, Lamar gets hurt and he has to play some games and he wins some games, he gets those incentives, then he'll get that money. But, Lamar's been healthy, he's been good. So we probably won't see a lot of Cooper Rush. More than likely, we won't see a lot of Cooper Rush, right? Unless we're talking about blowout type victories, right? Of course. So I was fine with all of that, right? What the Ravens did in free agency, perfectly fine with me, right? So now I think the next phase is, right, what do you see on the Ravens roster where they can still improve, where they can still attack, and they still have needs, right? I think kind of 4 things kind of jump out to you, right? They can still attack O-line, safety, edge, and cornerback. All right. Now, O-line and safety, I'm not going to really talk about because I believe those positions are going to be addressed in the draft, right? I don't think there's after bringing back Ben Cleveland, I don't think there's really free agent offensive linemen that the Ravens are really keen on going after. That's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong. It could sign somebody tomorrow. Who knows? And the safety market, um, the Ravens have had up and down success, let's call it, with bringing in outside safety into the room. I don't think they're going that path again. I think they're just going to draft somebody. Depends on whether that's high or in the mid rounds, but I think the Ravens will bring in another safety via the draft, right? So we'll talk about those two. Now, the two that I will talk about is edge and cornerback. Now, so for cornerback, I think there's a couple of guys that really kind of strike the interest of the guys that the Ravens could be interested in. Now, I've mentioned Jair Alexander a lot. I'm not going to talk about him because he's not a really traditional free agent. He's still on the Packers as of right now. But guys that are free agents that I think the Ravens might be interested in bringing in, Stephon Gilmore, obviously an older cornerback, but he's still playing good football. He's still a guy that can play man coverage on the outside. When I did the free agent podcast or free agent preview podcast, Evan, he brought up Stephon Gilmore, and it's a good shout, right? Stephon Gilmore is a guy that could come in, still get the Ravens good production on the outside, and they won't be dependent on him to play 70% of the snaps, right? He will play a part-time filler-in kind of role, which is what he can do, right? Another guy is Rasul Douglas, right? So Rasul Douglas, I believe that he'll probably go back to the Buffalo Bills, but he is a free agent currently, and tough, physical player, smart player, right? So he kind of fits all the things that Ravens are looking for in a corner. But like I said, I think he's going to go back to Buffalo. I don't think Buffalo wants to lose him. They're just waiting to lock up on the deal. But if that doesn't happen, Rasul Douglas is the kind of guy that I would love to see in Baltimore, right? And then lastly, he was here last year, which is Trey White, right? Now Tre'Davious White is a guy that I say the Ravens can let go. Is fine, it is what it is, But if he happens to hang out there until that May June period, right before we're getting ready to start, a training camp. This is when the Ravens like to sign some of these older players, especially cornerbacks or guys that are still kind of hanging out there, haven't had a deal. Trey White, that could be his case, right? He might just hang out there, not really get a deal, not get much looks. And he could be a guy that, hey, look, well, he's still out here. He's going to be on the cheaper side. Let's get Trey White back in here. Now, when he played last year, I was impressed with him, right? I'm going to be one of the first people to say that when the Ravens traded for Trey White, I was down on the move, right? I thought he was done, over the hill, washed, right? I was wrong. He played very, very well. He honestly gave the Ravens, I think, better snaps than Brandon Stevens did last year, particularly finding the ball in coverage, making plays on the football. I like what I saw from Trey White last year, right? So now if it came down to it and the options were limited, I wouldn't mind having Trey White back in Baltimore at all, right? I think that would be a fine move for the Ravens to do, all right? And now for the edge spot, right? There's a couple of guys. There's a lot of different defensive linemen available. The names don't really pop off the screen, but it is two ex-Ravens out there that I believe had a chance to be Ravens last season that are still available that the Ravens could look into, right? And that's Matthew Judon and Zadarius Smith, right? Now, these are two guys that, honestly, I would say that during their careers with Baltimore, the Ravens undervalued, right? They undervalued these two players, and they went out and made great careers for themselves elsewhere. But as we know, when the Ravens come to those guys, after you get your second contract, you're on your third, fourth contract, you can come in here as an older player and play, right? We've already seen this with Kyle Van Noy. So I don't think this is out the realm of possibility for Judon and Zadarius Smith to come back this year, particularly Matthew Judon, right? I believe that maybe if it was up to him last season, he probably would have been a Raven last year. But he got traded from the Patriots. He didn't really control his destination like that. Ended up going to Atlanta. It had an up and down time in Atlanta. I feel like he could come to the Ravens and be a guy that, not a full-time starter, because at this point in free agency, you aren't really finding guys who are full-time starters, but a guy that can contribute to the Ravens. He can contribute to the pass rush, right? The Ravens have a good, solid rotation, right? They need more bodies in there. They need more effective players, right? So Matthew Judon to me is still a guy that's an effective player. Same with Zadarius Smith, right? His kind of power, his kind of versatility. I mean, you see Zadarius Smith, he can still do it, whether it's line up over a guard, line up over a center, even rushing off the edge. So that kind of guy, that kind of chess piece that where, Zach Orr coming in his second year as a defensive coordinator, he has a guy that can truly move around, be versatile, that's a good move, right? So when I look at the Ravens, they're in a good spot where they currently are in free agency, right? We know that they weren't going to make any big money, splashy kind of moves. That's just not how they typically spend their dollars in free agency, or at all, really. So we'll see what happens from here. But I think there's a couple little solid moves, especially on the edge and cornerback market, that the Ravens can make that will make the defense feel more solid going into the year. And because we're looking at it, right, the Ravens don't have they have needs, they have holes, but there's not a lot of them, right? I would figure that more, like I said, offensive line will be addressed during the draft, and edge and corner they can get that in the free agency, right? So that's my thoughts on it. Give me your thoughts on where you think the Ravens are right now, currently, and give me some players that you think the Ravens should target that are currently free agents, right? But we'll leave it there. Scary to the Fan TV. I'm out.